So this is a workshop on restorative justice, making space for encounter and healing in legal systems. And their bios are amazing. If you are looking also for ways to develop this concept in your own communities, these are 4 of the giants in the field, and so their extensive experience. No. Honest. I will tell you in a second how they are my personal heroes. And so, so their bios are extensive, and then the other thing that we won't have as much time to talk about are the incredible projects that each of these gentlemen are bringing ahead. And so I'm going to start with Doug. Doug, we've been friends for 30 years. The Georgia Justice Project is, according to me, a little piece of heaven on earth in terms of what justice will look like when we all get there. And so he's been working on these methods for healing within the criminal justice system for since 35. Oh my gosh! We're older than we thought, right? So welcome, Doug. Father Dan Griffith is here with his colleague Julie Craven, who is sitting in the front taking pictures, and they are spearheading an amazing project at the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis, and also St. Paul. The Initiative on Restorative Justice and Healing, teaching, and also Minneapolis in many ways was very hard hit by a lot of tragedies and difficulties. That were all, including the clergy abuse crisis. And so also insight into what do these processes for healing mean for the life of the church. And Father Dan Griffith and Julie Craven, his colleague, are really just doing amazing work in that area. Judge David Shaheed, as many of you know him as one of our heroes in interreligious dialogue, and he just received an amazing, very prestigious prize from the community. And what was the name of the organization?
Center for Interfaith Cooperation.
So honoring him for his kind of lifetime commitment and work to interreligious dialogue. So a follower of Imam Din Muhammad, and one of the original members of the Lunch at Shapiro's, right? And so bringing together Christians, Jews, and Muslims to work for deep friendship, which could then drive our work in interreligious dialogue. And then aside from that, also Judge Shaheed gave amazing contributions to some of our international work in exploring the project called Communion and Law that the Focolare has, that's international. And so the ways in which, for example, approaches to drug courts, to alternative ways of thinking about sentencing, and so just a long time commitment to bringing these relationships of healing. And finally, Judge Thomas Donnelly. It's the first time that he's here with us in a Focolare setting. Welcome. And so the project that we may not be able to spend a lot of time talking about is the Catholic Criminal Justice Reform Network. And so a project to bring together those who work within the criminal justice system, so defense attorneys, prosecutors, those working within the prison systems, together with system-impacted folks, so those who have served time in prison or who have been impacted by crime, to get them in a setting where they can sit. Actually, we kind of have also learned something from Hearth methods, so sit in tables like this to be able to hear each other's stories and be transformed by the encounter.
We stole the method.
And so, how many dialogues have you done through 10 dialogues in different cities, working with dioceses, and so the bishops are calling and saying, Tom, can you bring this method also to our city, because it's been really just truly transformative. And so, and that's not even what we're going to focus on, right? But just to know if you're curious about these methods and want to learn more about these projects. So, okay, with that, we're going to spend a little bit of time just with 2 rounds of quick questions for them, and then we're going to break into 4 groups where you have time to sort of do a dive with one of our speakers asking further questions. But the first question will also just give us a little bit of a ramp into what is restorative justice, what are the methods, and then we're going to pivot at a certain point to what are some of the complexities and questions that our panelists have, and that will then open out to further conversation and discussion for you to kind of pick their brains, ask your honest questions about what might be rising for you when you think about learning more about these methods. So we're going to, since Father Dan is not only a lawyer and an amazing pastor, but also a teacher, we're going to ask, and teaches this class on restorative justice at the University of St. Thomas Law School. We're going to ask Father Dan to open us and reflect a little bit about some of the methods.
Great. Thank you to Amy. It's wonderful. We all consider ourselves friends of Amy, which is a great gift to all of us. Great to be with all of you. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on what restorative justice is. Just a couple of minutes. So this is a long elevator speech, maybe a minute or 2. Restorative justice is a philosophical and practical approach to harm. And it's rooted really historically in the indigenous culture of North American First Nation indigenous people, also New Zealand, and pre-colonial Africa. It can be found in many different cultures historically, and really became a worldwide movement in the 1970s when it was used in response to property crime in Canada. And what happened is it became a worldwide movement because it's effective. It's utilized across various disciplines and professions now worldwide, and we tell our law students because it's effective in responding to harm. It asks who was harmed, what is the nature of the harm. It might be criminal harm, it might be non-criminal harm, and this is the key question: how can the harm be repaired? And one of the misperceptions is that it's primarily victim-survivor centered. It may involve a perpetrator, an offender, but it may not, and that has to be discerned carefully in terms of its use. But it really has been successful. The other thing that I've seen is that it's in accord with our human nature, right? We're social creatures. We are also meant to flourish, and when we're harmed, to have that harm repaired. And a couple of other reasons why I think it's become so effective and has become a worldwide movement is because it is adaptable. You can use it in various circumstances. You can use it creatively. And for all those, and then finally, it involves multiple stakeholders. And in the criminal area, it allows the victim to be heard in ways that sometimes our current legal system doesn't allow. Some of us are from the Catholic tradition. Some of us are from other faith traditions and other traditions. And one of the things that I just want to emphasize at the beginning is this notion of justice, right? What is justice? The classical definition is that justice is about giving one their due. It's a great definition. Thomas Aquinas affirms it in the Summa. But biblical justice, anybody know the definition of biblical justice? Shout it out. We'll be interactive here. Right relationship. In Hebrew scripture, justice is about being in right relationship with God and neighbor. And that's why what I've found is restorative justice can be so effective within religious settings, including in Catholic settings, because it's scriptural. It's based in the call of Jesus to be in right relationship with particularly those on the margins, the bent down, the anahuim, the suffering, those who have been harmed in any way. And I'll just take 1 or 2 more minutes and hand it over to our other colleagues. Julie and I have found that it is really powerful within the formation of lawyers. So we teach a class, it's full every semester, not because we're great, because we're not, but we're able teachers. It's full because the students want something that is inspiring. They want more tools in their toolkit. It helps form them as excellent lawyers, good listeners, compassionate. We talked in the opening sessions about the humanity and the fact that we're called to listen and to accompany, and those are the skills that clients want in their lawyers. The study of that has been really affirmed. Clients want lawyers who are compassionate and good listeners. Final point with regard to our class is one of the highlights is they go to the Stillwater Correctional Facility and are with incarcerated men who are in a Restorative Justice 101 program. And it breaks down barriers. It inspires them that they might change the system and reform the system. It allows them to be to really walk with those folks and learn as they learn about the power of restorative justice. And then one thing on one practice, Amy asked us to talk about a restorative practice, and I'll talk about the circle experience. So the circle experience, again, was rooted in the indigenous practices. And we enter into a circle, everyone is equal, there is a talking piece, what's said in the circle stays in the circle. Those who are not speaking accompany and listen attentively to what might be harm. And there is great grace that happens in a circle. I've been part of over 100 circles, and something amazing happens. And again, there are other restorative practices that we'll mention, but the circle experience is powerful. If you get a chance to learn more and maybe enter into a circle, it is a great experience. So great to be with you, and I'll turn it over to our other colleagues.
Great. So we'll ask Judge Donnelly to share. So Judge Donnelly and Judge Shaheed, we're very fortunate to have also different roles within the legal system. And so what is one practice that comes to mind that has made a difference? And how does that how do you make room for that within what are the ordinary constraints of the roles that within the legal system and the ways of speaking and the ways of interacting?
So I've been a judge for 25 years, and most of that time I had no interest in helping people settle cases, either when I was presiding in criminal cases or in tort cases. But I get transferred in 2022 to a commercial call, business disputes between people. And I thought, well, this is a venue that's appropriate for settlement. So I apply the normal methods of case settlement. You tell each side how bad their case is and hope that things will get better. And I found that this was catastrophically a failure because everybody got defensive and hardened their positions. So I know Amy knows this. I don't know if any of you know this essay, The Right Use of School Studies as Preparation for Faith by Simone Weil. Anyone read that essay? Well, go out, leave now. Use AI to find it. It's a 4-page essay, and it's one of the most beautiful things ever written. And Weil is W-E-I-L.
AI would tell you that.
Yes. A Jewish woman who wrote profoundly about what is the purpose of attention. And her essay is that you start with school study, you pay attention, and one of the things you need to pay attention to anything is faith. There's something worth paying attention to. But the highest moment of faith is to pay attention to someone who's in suffering. That is the purpose of all of attention. And so she has this reading of the Grail legend, and she says in the Grail, the only way to obtain the Grail is to ask the person who's in suffering, What are you going through? So I stole that line. And I now, in settlement conferences, which is the way we do settlement conferences generally, is that we speak to each side alone, so plaintiff and then defense. And I will brush the lawyer to the side, and I will say to the person who's the party, what are you going through? And they most instinctively say, well, can I say anything? And I go, yes, you can say anything. And what we get, and we were talking about this before, is you get the whole arc story of their life. And this case, this problem, this area of suffering that we're talking about in particular, is but one star in the whole constellation of their life. And they put that into context. And they become human, which, as Father Dan pointed out, we don't allow in courtrooms. We don't allow the humanity of either the judge or the litigants to appear. We're all masked. And all that's presented is one narrow moment of somebody's life in a criminal case or a civil case, and everything else is, as we would say, irrelevant. And sometimes this takes a long time. So you ask them what they're going through, and people will talk for an hour and a half. So my colleagues think I'm hilarious, because they would never, their settlement conferences last an hour. Mine sometimes go on for 11 hours. But the result is that when people have a chance to tell their story fully and be in a place where you're empathetically listening, that they feel a certain peace, and they're willing to make peace with a person that they hate because they've been heard. And so that practice, it's very simple, is just, what are you going through? And you can use this at home, you can use this on the bus, you can use this on the train. But it's a simple, open-ended question that elicits from somebody, what are they going through?
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tom. And one of the things that is coming to my mind is we are at school, we're reading a book called The Amen Effect by Rabbi Sharon Brous. And she describes this practice of these circles going in opposite directions in the temple. And those who have suffered or are grieving in some way, going in one direction and meeting the others. And it's the practice of stopping and saying, what happened to you? And so this sense in which often, I'm looking at Laurie as a lawyer, but often the procedures that we are constrained by don't even leave room for that question, right? To say, what has happened to you? And so just what are the ways of making space for that? So Judge Shaheed, share with us some of your wisdom and experience with also these methods and what has emerged from them.
Well, first of all, let me just say I'm so grateful to be here with all of you. In the work and what my life normally involves, being with all of you people is like being close to the angels. But in full disclosure, let me say this. I came to the bench not as most people do. And when I say that is with the name Shaheed, I was elected judge in Indiana after 2001, after 9/11. And so when I took the bench, I knew that I was not there because I was the smartest guy or the best politician, but because God wanted me there for a reason. So when you are in a space because you didn't get there on your own, it causes you to see what you're doing in a slightly different way. The other part I would have to say, and get in full disclosure, is my association with Kara Lubick and the Focolare. And as a Muslim, with the Quran as our book, Jesus is a dominant piece. Mary, his mother, is a dominant piece. But my association with the Focolare caused me to see how Jesus was a healer and how each of us in our daily lives and the people we come in contact with can be in that same space as a healer. So those two things kind of informed what I was doing on the bench in a black robe. And so my association primarily has been with problem-solving courts, veterans courts, drug courts, reentry courts, mental health courts. And we're talking about harm. And in all of those cases, the people who are in those courts, primarily because of nonviolent offenses where they are the person that has been suffering, my work has been to work with those individuals to hear their narrative, and in hearing their narrative and being able to articulate their narrative, the healing through just the interaction with the judge and with what they do in group, is allowing them a chance to heal and to recover. And the logic with respect to problem-solving courts is if you addressed the root cause of a person being in court, they don't reoffend. In other words, if someone has diabetes and if they're on proper medication, they can function as everyone else does. And it's the same thing with someone that has experienced trauma in Afghanistan or some other combat situation. If you can address what is causing them to self-medicate, they don't feel the need to use alcohol, or they will take their medication. And so that's the role of the judge, and my role has been to help those people find a healing path so they are no longer in the criminal justice system, and so they can go on with their lives and be a better mother, a better father, a better citizen in our country, pay taxes, and all the good things that citizens do. So my thanks to Kiara Lubick, the Focolare, and also thank God for being able to work in a space where I can help people.
Beautiful. Thank you, David, for all your work in this area. Really. We're going to pivot slightly as we turn to Doug and Doug's work, because we know that the terrain into which this conversation falls is not always friendly, right? It's not like people are standing up and saying, yes, we need more of these methods and techniques, right? And so there might be some resistance. There might also be some political resistance, some cultural resistance. And so we need really people who are super tenacious and super creative, right, in their commitment. And so, Doug, can you tell us about your tenacious and creative commitment in this in this field, in this cultural terrain?
Is this about my basketball game? Is that what that's definitely, no. Amy, thank you so much for being here. We all are friends of Amy, and that's an amazing and a wonderful thing to be. Thank you for being my friend, and thank you for having us and having me here. Great to see so many old friends, new friends, I hope, too. Doug Ammar from Atlanta, Georgia, and I run the Georgia Justice Project. We're a small nonprofit right behind the King Center, right behind Dr. King's grave, actually. And we love our relationship with the Focolare, and always wanted to increase and do more things together. So maybe the first thing to talk about, just so those who don't know what we do, we're a nonprofit. We're weird. We're just weird. We're like a private public defender on steroids, is one of my interns. We do everything we do is for free. We don't take court appointments, so judges call. Actually, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the last 2 or 3 are good friends, and they even call and say, thank you, Judge, give our name to the family, and they can call us. And so when you say no to a judge, lawyers never say no to a judge, right? It's just, we're not, right? I say no to judges all the time, and it's great. Because I say, because we're not reporting to the court. We get our clients from the community. So, but the point is that we represent folk in the criminal setting and in things related to criminal law. We do this outside of the system. We raise money to support our work. But what we're really about is, one of the ways I think about our work, and I love this conversation, and the theme I see going on is this, I use the terms often three-dimensionality of being engaged with somebody. Or unsiloing sort of the system that is very siloed, whether it's by role or bureaucracy. So many times when I've been doing this work for a long time, we do a number of things. We keep adding on to our work, but the thing we've done the longest is I'm a defense lawyer, not a judge or a law professor or a priest. I defend people. We defend people.
Still time, by the way.
There's still time. That's right. There's still time. That's right. That's right. But we do a lot more than just represent people. We follow our folks into prison. We help them when they get out of prison. We take our clients' families to visit them in prison. We've added work. We actually, for the last 6 years, we go to the only prison in the Atlanta metro area, working with guys, 50 guys a year, helping them as they get out. Records, which is the biggest thing we do in number. I think last year we represented about just 2,200 people just on criminal records issues, expungement, if you will. There's a lot of things we do. We also do policy work. We've, about 15 or so years ago, decided to go upstream in our battle, take the lessons of what we saw in the courts, in the jails, and the prisons, and try to change the law. And we're still aggressive on that. So just to give you a general landscape. So we show up in all these different arenas, direct service, policy. We do a lot of community engagement. But we also, I would say, and maybe the thing to really drill down on for a moment is around restorative justice, just for a moment. I've been a big fan of restorative justice, even before I went to law school, well, a long time ago. And I've been trying to inject, in the cases we represented, I would try to inject RJ into the case. But the problem, and I did, homicide cases, armed robbery cases, aggravated assault cases, I would bring the victim in, I would have our clients write letters of forgiveness, wild stuff, and anathema to most criminal defense lawyers. Because what you're taught as a criminal defense lawyer is you never admit that your client did anything wrong, right? One of my friends, he goes to Ebenezer Baptist Church, and he was a prosecutor, still is, but for a long time, for a brief moment, he became a defense lawyer when he got frustrated. And I ran into him at court one day, and I was in the lobby of a big courthouse, and he was so excited to tell me about his defense practice, and he handed me his card, and his card, as a new defense lawyer, said, the website was youdidn'tdoit.com. And I thought that epitomizes the mentality that either you're taught or you're supposed to have. You never admit you did something. So how in the world can a defense lawyer, or how can a client admit they did something wrong when their lawyers are telling them never admit you did something wrong? So aside from that, which is a huge barrier, it is a huge barrier. I give talks to public defenders all the time, and I say this and they freak out, But the problem is, at least in Georgia, not in other parts of the country, in the Deep South, there's been no sort of mechanized structure for restorative justice. If you live in New York, you live in the West Coast, you live in the upper Midwest, even here in Texas, there are some restorative justice things that have happened, but not in the Deep South. So what I wanted to do is what we've created essentially for the last few years is we call it Restorative Justice Georgia, but we created the architecture not for our clients, but for the system's client, people going through the system. And the way we did it is that we got agreements from the elected prosecutors in 2 of the big counties around Atlanta to send cases to this method. Because even if I, as a defense lawyer, even as a good judge, we had prosecutors say the very thing to us. They said, when I went to, we work with, I'll give you the best example I know, the head of one of the state agencies is a prosecutor agency who we work with on policy, and at the end of a meeting a few years ago, I said, by the way, and this guy, by the way, has been in the news, national news for a while. His name is Pete Scandalakis. He's got recently announced he's not going to prosecute one of the state, you probably know the name of it. We can talk about it, all the politics. But I said, Pete, by the way, we have a few minutes. By the way, what do you know about restorative justice? And he said, well, what do you mean? He said, we're starting this thing. I said, and he said to me the same thing I've said for years. He said, Doug, I've had victims who wanted a restorative justice, but there's been nowhere to send them. There's been no mechanism, no architecture, no structure. So what we decided to do is to create that structure, to create that mechanism. And that has been interesting and somewhat, and we have cases, of course. It's moving slowly, but I'll just point out, we're also trying to change the law on that because unlike Illinois, which we've talked about, and even if somebody says something in a conferencing, in a circle, that information could get out. And if a defendant says, I did it, and you don't have a successful conference like mediation, then that information could hurt that person when they come in front of one of these judges, if you will, for instance, right? So the idea is we're trying to pass a law to make everything confidential inside those circles. And we've run into a lot of resistance there in the state legislature, have a bill pending for the last 2.5 years or so. Hasn't gotten through, obviously. But let me say the other resistance, let me just give a couple resistance points in terms of change. It took you 12 years. Okay, I'm already frustrated with 2.5. Okay, I'm too impatient. That's right, Illinois did it. But one of the resistance points we see is often in the bureaucracy. So we're working with one big prosecutor office on RJ, where it's not the elected official who wants to send cases and wants this alternative to be available for her community. It's the people who are the lower level prosecutors and administrators who are so used to holding on to power that they're unwilling to let go of it. And how do we get that to happen? How do we get that to those guys to what I would say too is I think in light of resistance, the question to me is, what is the paradigm of success? What is the paradigm of freedom? Or lately I've been saying, I wrote something recently, I call it what is our line of sight to freedom? Do we have a line of sight to freedom? And so, and when it comes to these kind of things, when it comes to this broader notion of not just humanizing is an easy way of saying it, humanizing our clients, humanizing people in the system, humanizing victims in the system, it really gets down to taking away power from the state. But if you say that, you want to see people lock up, they're going to lock up. But that's kind of what we're doing. But if you say, listen, we're going to intentionally, regularly make this a three-dimensional situation instead of a one-dimensional encounter. Recently, just 2 weeks ago, we had a really big case, juvenile, 16 years old. He was being charged as an adult. We got involved, referred by a couple groups, spent the last year and a half pounding the case. We had a bunch of experts, psychologists, et cetera. And we were trying to convince the court that this kid shouldn't be tried as an adult, that he should be tried as a juvenile. And my lawyers, they were so fired up. We had everybody lined up for court. We were all going down there. And we were so ready to have that fight. We were so ready. But we walked into court, and the documents we provided, they finally read them, and they were like, yeah, we shouldn't try this kid as an adult. Because we documented this kid, we showed him to be three-dimensional. And the court, without a fight, much to the chagrin of all my interns who were really wanting to see us fight, we won the fight without fighting, which is the best kind of fight to have. But the point is that what I would say, the line of sight of freedom is often not just making our clients three-dimensional, but making it in a way that people in positions of power, like judges and prosecutors, I'm a defense lawyer, I don't have any power. Defense lawyers have no power. These guys have all the power in the court system, at least more than I do. Prosecutors have all the power. So how do you get them to lean into an opportunity? And it's not by telling them they're wrong, and it's not by telling them they should be different. It's by giving them a line of sight to something that's generative, that's opens their minds and their hearts up in more ways than just my client, but it's to the next client and to their neighbor and to the people they see every day. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling on, Amy. I'll stop there. And I didn't, yeah.
Amazing, and I think also what I love is also how we're gathering some images, right? And so this, I think, what we can all carry away is, in what ways is, from a critical perspective, in what ways are the systems that we're working within making too many things one-dimensional, right? Where we can't see we don't have that depth of vision, and what happens to us in a lot of ways. This is similar to the AI conversation, right? So this notion that there are dimensions of insight into what should happen in a person's life or even in a system that require a kind of dimension of wisdom. And so I think in many ways what we're talking about is how do we mine the wisdom of human experience in order to understand what is the best what's the best outcome also in